I didn't argue, didn't yell, didn't fight. Just said calmly, quietly, I'd rather not. 3 words. Simple boundary. Polite disagreement. He went silent. Not quiet, silent. Didn't speak to me for 2 days. I didn't disagree loudly. I disagreed politely, and that was enough. By Saturday morning, the house felt frozen. I'd spent 5 years believing that peace required avoiding conflict, that if I didn't argue, didn't yell, didn't create drama, everything would be fine, that the key to harmony was staying calm, being reasonable, not fighting, and the moment I realized that calm disagreement was punished just as severely as loud disagreement, the moment I understood that the issue wasn't my tone but my autonomy, everything I'd believed about keeping peace collapsed, revealed itself as me having no opinion, no preference, no separate existence that might differ from his. I'm 44, I left 16 months ago, and it took me a year to understand that the silence wasn't him needing space. Wasn't him processing, wasn't him being hurt by what I'd said. It was punishment cold. Punishment designed to teach me that disagreeing in any form, loud or quiet, dramatic or calm, carried consequences so severe I'd learned to stop disagreeing, stop having preferences that differed from his, stop existing as a separate person who might say, I'd rather not, to anything he wanted. By Saturday morning, I understood. The problem wasn't how I said it. The problem was that I said it. I thought being calm would protect me. I didn't expect calm to be just as dangerous as conflict. If you've ever stayed calm, avoided arguing, disagreed politely, and still been punished with withdrawal, if you've learned that the problem wasn't your tone, but your disagreement itself, if you've realized that peace didn't come from being reasonable, but from having no preferences, you already know what I'm describing. You already know the specific despair of doing everything right and still being wrong, of staying calm and still being punished. And I'm realizing as I tell you this, some of you are staying calm right now, avoiding conflict, disagreeing politely, and still paying for it. So here's what I need to know. What did you disagree about calmly that still got you punished? Just drop it in the comments. I calmly said blank and got blank days of silence. Let's see if we're all being punished for the same calm disagreements. I spent 5 years thinking if I just stayed calm enough, reasonable enough, I could have preferences without consequences. I was wrong. The consequences had nothing to do with how I disagreed, only that I disagreed. Now let me tell you exactly what happened. The 3 words. The 2 days. The moment I realized calm didn't protect me. We'd been together 5 years, living together for 3, both divorced, both in our 40s, both thought we'd learned from past relationships, knew how to communicate, how to handle disagreement like adults. He seemed reasonable, seemed like someone who valued calm discussion, who didn't want drama, who appreciated that I stayed level-headed, didn't yell, didn't create scenes. I thought staying calm was the solution. Didn't recognize it wouldn't matter. Year 2, I noticed he'd withdraw when I disagreed with him. Not when I argued, when I disagreed. Even calmly, even reasonably, would suggest something different than what he wanted. He'd go quiet. Would express preference that wasn't his preference. He'd become distant, didn't yell at me, didn't argue back, just withdrew, became cold. Made it clear through absence that my disagreement, however calm, had consequences. I started avoiding disagreement. Not because I was afraid of fighting, because I was afraid of the silence, the withdrawal, the days of coldness that followed any instance of me having different preference, different opinion, different want than his. The silence was worse than arguing, was lonelier, was more isolating. At least arguing was engagement. Silence was exile. Year 3, I'd learned to agree, to not have preferences that differed, to say yes to what he wanted, to go along, to not express different opinion, not because I agreed, because disagreeing, even calmly, cost too much, cost days of withdrawal, days of coldness, Days of being invisible in my own house. My sister visited that year. We were discussing where to go for dinner. He suggested a place. I started to suggest somewhere else, caught myself, agreed with his choice. Later, my sister said, "Why didn't you suggest the place you wanted?" I said I did suggest it. She said, "No, you started to, then agreed with him." I said it's easier that way. She said, "Easier than what?" I said, "Easier than disagreeing." She looked concerned, said, "You can't disagree with him." I said, "I can, I just don't. It's not worth it." She said, "Worth what?" I said, "The silence, the withdrawal, the days of him not speaking to me if I have different preference." She said, "That's not normal. You should be able to have different opinion." I said, "I can have different opinion. I just keep it to myself. It's fine." It wasn't fine. I just didn't know how to explain that I'd learned to have no preferences, no opinions, no separate wants, because expressing them, even calmly, even reasonably, resulted in punishment I couldn't handle. Year 4, I tried disagreeing calmly again. Small thing, he wanted to visit his family for the weekend. I said I'd rather not. I was exhausted from work, needed quiet weekend at home. Said it calmly, reasonably, no drama, no yelling. Just simple statement of my preference. His face changed, went blank, cold. Said, "Fine, I'll go alone." I said, "I'm not saying you shouldn't go. I'm just saying I'd rather stay home." He said, "I heard what you said." Didn't speak to me the rest of the evening. Didn't speak Friday. Didn't speak Saturday. Went to his family's alone. Came back Sunday. Still didn't speak. Monday morning finally broke the silence. Said he needed to think about whether I was committed to this relationship. I'd calmly expressed a preference. And he was questioning the entire relationship. That's when I realized disagreeing wasn't the problem. Having preferences was. Month 53, something happened that made it undeniable. We were deciding about vacation. He wanted beach. I said I'd prefer mountains, said it calmly, explained my reasoning. Wasn't arguing, wasn't demanding. Just expressing different preference. He said, "Okay," seemed fine. Went quiet for the rest of the evening. Didn't speak Tuesday. Didn't speak Wednesday. Thursday morning said he decided we should just take separate vacations since we clearly wanted different things. I said I'm fine with beach. I was just sharing my preference. He said if you wanted beach, you would have said beach. Obviously you want mountains. I said I expressed a preference. That doesn't mean I'm demanding it. We can discuss it. He said there's nothing to discuss. You want one thing, I want another. We're not compatible. For expressing a calm preference about vacation destination, he was questioning our compatibility. Month 56, I stopped expressing preferences entirely. Stopped having opinions about where to eat, what to do, where to go. When he'd ask what I wanted, I'd say, "Whatever you want." When he'd ask my opinion, I'd say I'm fine with anything. Became someone who had no wants, no preferences, no separate desires. He seemed happier. The withdrawal stopped. The silence stopped because I'd stopped disagreeing. Stopped having different preferences. Stopped being separate person with separate wants. I'd become an echo. Someone who only reflected his preferences back. Month 58, my best friend noticed. Said, "You agree with everything he says. You don't have any preferences anymore. You used to have opinions about things." I said I still have opinions. I just don't share them. She said, "Why not?" I said, "Because it's not worth it." She said, "Worth what?" I said, "The silence, the withdrawal, the days of punishment for having different preference." She said, "That's not right. You should be able to say what you want." I said, "I can say what I want. I choose not to. It's easier this way." She said, "Easier for who?" I said, "Both of us." She looked sad. Said, "It's not easier for you. You've disappeared. You've become someone with no preferences because expressing them costs too much." She was right. I'd become echo. Someone who reflected his preferences back to him. Who had no separate wants because having them was punishable. Month 62, something broke. Small thing. Tuesday evening, he asked what I wanted for dinner. I said, whatever you want. He said, no. What do you want? I said, I'm fine with anything. He said, you must want something. I said, honestly, I don't know what I want anymore. I've gotten so used to not having preferences. He said, that's ridiculous. Everyone has preferences. I said, I used to have preferences. Then I learned that expressing them resulted in days of silence, so I stopped having them. He said, I've never punished you for having preferences. I said, every time I've disagreed with you, even calmly, you've withdrawn, gone silent, made me pay for having different want than yours. He said, that's not punishment. That's me needing space when there's conflict. I said, there's no conflict when I calmly say I prefer something different. Conflict is you making my preference into relationship crisis. Withdrawing for days because I said I'd rather not. He went silent, proved my point. Didn't speak the rest of Tuesday. Didn't speak Wednesday. Thursday evening finally said, if you think I am punishing you for having opinions, maybe we're not right for each other. I'd named the pattern, and the pattern punished me for naming it. Month 63, I realized the relationship required me to have no preferences, no opinions, no separate wants. Required me to agree, to go along, to reflect his preferences back to him without having any of my own. The calm didn't matter. The reasonableness didn't matter. The lack of arguing didn't matter. What mattered was that I didn't disagree at all, in any form, loud or quiet, dramatic or calm. That's when I understood my compliance wasn't optional. It was required. Month 64, I left. Told him I couldn't stay in a relationship where having preferences was punishable, where calm disagreement resulted in days of withdrawal, where expressing different want than his made him question our compatibility. He said I was being dramatic, said everyone has disagreements. I said we don't have disagreements. We have me agreeing with you or being punished for not agreeing with you. That's not disagreement, that's submission. He said I never demanded you agree with me. I said you didn't have to demand it. You made the consequences of disagreeing so severe that I learned to stop disagreeing, to stop having preferences, to stop existing as person with separate wants. That's not partnership. That's me becoming echo of you. 16 months out, I'm learning to have preferences again. Learning to say I'd rather not without waiting for punishment. Learning that disagreeing doesn't make me difficult. That having different preference doesn't make me incompatible. That calm disagreement is normal, healthy, required part of actual partnership. I'm learning that the right person doesn't punish disagreement, doesn't withdraw when I have different preference, doesn't make my calm I'd rather not into relationship crisis. That healthy partnership includes different wants, different preferences, different opinions, and those differences don't result in days of silence, don't trigger withdrawal, don't make me someone who needs to disappear to keep peace. Here's what I desperately wish someone had told me the first time I disagreed calmly and got punished anyway. If someone withdraws when you disagree, if calm I'd rather not results in days of silence, if expressing different preference makes them question the relationship, the problem isn't that you disagreed. The problem is that they've made your agreement mandatory, your compliance required, your preferences irrelevant, and that's not you being difficult. That's them making your autonomy punishable. And staying calm won't protect you because the issue isn't your tone, it's your separate existence. If you're reading this and you're staying calm, avoiding conflict, disagreeing politely, and still being punished, if you've learned that the problem isn't how you express preferences, but that you have them, if you've realized that peace requires having no opinions, number wants, no separate preferences, you're not in partnership. You're in dynamic where your autonomy is punishable and your submission is required. And you staying calm won't change that because calm disagreement is still disagreement, and disagreement itself is what's being punished. If this resonated, if you've realized calm didn't protect you from punishment, The next video is crucial. It's called I Noticed the Pattern, He Made Me Pay. It's about what happens when you finally see the pattern clearly, when you recognize what's been happening, when you understand the mechanism you've been living in, and instead of that clarity helping, instead of recognition leading to conversation, you get punished for seeing, for noticing, for being perceptive enough to recognize what he needed you not to see. Link is on screen now.